Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you all so much for taking the time out to be here. My name is Daniel Edmund, and on behalf of Maya and myself, we would like to thank you all for taking the time to tune in to the launch of Maya's new book, Half Woman, Half Grief. Maya is a dear friend of mine, colleague, and sister to me, and I feel very blessed and fortunate and honored to be the host for this evening. Before we get started, we just want to outline a few housekeeping rules. For the duration of the event, could you please make sure that you stay on mute? It's up to you whether you would like to keep your camera on or off. It would be great to see your faces, but of course, we recognize it's Sunday evening and you may just want to chill out, so feel free to turn your camera off if you would like to. We invite and encourage you all to engage in the conversation in the chat section of the Zoom, so feel free to do that. We will be doing a Q&A after the conversation I have with Maya. And so feel free to put any questions in there. The chat will be moderated by Mel Rodriguez, who is doing all the behind the scenes operations for today's event. Mel is also Maya and I's manager. So it's a all in the family tonight. So it's been great to it. There's Mel. Hey. So that'll be the person who is moderating the chat, just so you can put a name to a face and everything like that. I feel really blessed that I am constantly surrounded by such incredible women. So that is another one that you've got a chance to meet. The topics for tonight's conversation will vary. And we're conscious that different people may be triggered by different topics that that Maya and I discuss. So we want to encourage you that if you do feel like you need to step away from the conversation or leave the Zoom for any reason, please feel free to do so. We completely understand, and you're more than welcome to join back in when you feel ready, if you feel ready. And so it is. We just want to give you permission to do that. If you need to step away, please feel free to step away. We also want to encourage you that if you are triggered in any way by some of the topics in our conversation, that you do speak to someone who you trust about how you're feeling, and then make sure that you are safeguarded and that you are protected and everything like that. I want to assure everyone that tonight is a safe space. And I feel, like I said, I feel so incredibly honored to be here. And tonight is a celebration of Maya and her accomplishments. So this is a celebratory event. And so we just want to have everyone to keep that in mind and to continue to send us good, positive energies, thoughts, and prayers as Maya and I have our conversation today. The order of the evening will be a conversation with myself and Maya, followed by a Q&A. And then we will get you all out of here on time. I promise you, you can hold me to it. We'll get you on out of here and you can enjoy the rest of your Sunday evening. So without further ado, I want to give a quick intro to Maya, who I think you can see on the screen already. But for those who don't know, Maya is a woman of color, a poet, a writer, and has helped to support people's well-being as an engagement worker and hypnotherapist. She has also spoken on the radio about grief, identity, and bullying, and was recently featured in Bristol Magazine just a month ago, I think it was. And it was a great write-up with a really great picture of her as well. So please help me welcome Maya Claria, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Maya, it's great to see you.
It's great to see you too.
I know we saw each other just like a few days ago, but it always feels like ages.
Yeah, it's lovely to see you all, even though I technically can't see you, but it's lovely to know that you're here. So thank you all for joining. It truly is a special night.
Yeah, it's so interesting when you do these events because it literally is like there are a bunch of people in the room, but I can only see you. So
exactly.
Well, tonight, Maya, we celebrate you. We celebrate you and we honor you. And I'm so incredibly proud, and I just feel so appreciative and blessed to be able to call you a friend and a sister, and thank you again for having me to host this evening and to be such a big part of this launch for you. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for hosting.
Of course, I wouldn't have missed it. I honestly wouldn't have. I also want to take a moment to honor your mother, Nutan Patel. I do believe she is here with us as in this moment, and so I just want to honor her and recognize her. I'm so sad I never got a chance to meet her, but from knowing you, she along with the rest of your family have done an incredible job with you, and so I just feel so incredibly blessed. So, yeah. without further ado, let's get into the conversation. You know, I've got the book with me right here. I finished reading it a few days ago. Half Woman, Half Grieve. Beautiful artwork. I mean, Maya, this book, I know we spoke about it a bit already. This book is transformational. What was your motivation for writing this book? We'll start off there.
Sure. So I knew I wanted to write a book from a very, very young age. So when my mother was still alive, so around the age of 7 or 8, I knew very clearly that I was supposed to write a book, to the point where she actually sent my work to publishers. So it must have been before she died. So it was when I was around 8 years old. And so that's always been in my mind. I've always been a writer. I studied creative writing at university. But it was about 2 years ago. I was talking to a young person that I worked with at the charity that I used to work for, and they are an illustrator and I'm a writer, and we were just saying how we really wanted to publish our own work. And we kind of made a bit of a pact, like if I do it, you do it. And we just kind of decided on a few first steps. And so the first step for me was deciding what poems to actually publish. And so I was thinking about it. And then suddenly this inspiration hit me about doing it around grief, because so many of my poems that I had written were about grief. And I also felt like that would really help other people, because I was writing from such a place of experience and pain. And it was a very intuitive feeling that this is what I needed to do. And so every step of the way, it just kind of developed itself. There was no pre-planning. The poems themselves sort of chose themselves. I've written about 600 odd poems, but I knew which ones I was going to use. And then even the name came out intuitively, and it's from the end of one of the poems in the book, Half Woman, Half Grief. Yeah. Which I know you've read now, so you know what I mean. And so everything was quite intuitive. Even finding the illustrator, it was through 2 of my friends, Tanisha and Kiva, and they knew this illustrator, and she agreed to do it. And she'd done a lot of sort of spiritual artwork and astrological artwork, and so I knew she was the one. And finding Dom, the book designer, she had already offered her help with the book when she even heard that I was doing it. So all the pieces kind of fell into place, which makes me know that I was meant to do this.
100%. And you touched on it a bit briefly in your response there, but what was the process for you in creating this book?
The process, like as in?
As a creative, as an author and a poet, what was the process for you like?
Right. So actually, I'd already written all of the poems,
right.
Or at least the majority of them. So it was really a case of intuitively choosing the poems that I wanted. So the material was actually already there.
Right.
And so the book, for those of you who haven't received it yet or haven't bought it yet, it's a journey. So I chose a bunch of poems, and then I intuitively mapped them out into a journey. So the first chapter is the unraveling. The second chapter is the surrender. The third chapter is the excavation, and the last chapter is the resurrection. And so these poems just kind of fell into each category very naturally. And so that was the process for how to chapter the books. And then the introduction was the last thing that I wrote, and I was, pardon my language, but I was shitting myself. I did not know how to write this introduction. And then one day it just came, and I just wrote it down very quickly, and I just knew that was it. So it was all a very, very sort of intuitive downloads and being guided.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you were writing them, I know you said that the poems were already written, but when you were actually writing the poems, you said it was just a download that you got.
All downloads, yeah. So a lot of the poems, I never sit down and sit with a book and just go, I'm going to write a poem. That has never been how I work. And even when I was at university, when they wanted me to do that, I found it very difficult. So all of these poems, Sometimes I was woken up in the middle of the night. I had to keep my phone handy. I had to keep my pen and paper handy. Sometimes I was just often actually in a forest nearby with the trees and the rivers, so connecting with Mother Nature. Sometimes just in the middle of just traveling or something. So I had to write them down very quickly because they just entered my mind, and they were written very quickly. Even though when I read back on them now, I'm like, how the hell did I don't know how I did that. So yeah, very interesting process.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean. I've been in those spaces before where it literally it's like a spiritual experience. You're getting downloads from your higher self or
Exactly.
some other space, and you're literally just hands of paper, and you almost have to read it back to be like, what did I just write for the past 20
Yeah,
minutes, you know?
exactly.
Yeah. How have you grown as an author and a poet from this book?
What's really interesting is I haven't actually written many poems since this book. And I think because it's taken so much of my creative energy, the poetry has just stopped for a while. And I trust that it will come again, because I've been a poet since I was like, I don't know, 6 or 7 years old. As an author, I've developed a lot because I self-published the book. I've learned a lot about how books are made, how, you know, the designing process, all of those things. So I feel I have a few more books in my mind that I want to create. So I feel a lot more confident about creating the next book. So I feel like I'm on my way to being an established author, hopefully.
You are 100%. You are 100%. You are. And yeah, what you've described as the creative process, I remember Lauryn Hill speaking about that. And it's like these peaks and valleys. And it's like, you know, right now you're at a peak. You've launched the book and you'll stay there for however long you're meant to stay there. But at some point, then you've got to journey back down, because you've got to start, you know, living life and getting prepared for the next peak that you'll go into. But right now you're at the peak, and so don't think about moving from the peak for a while now. You've done a lot of work to get here.
I think I just need to recover from giving birth to this one. So
yeah, it's just enjoy the new heights and the heights that are to come, because I genuinely believe that so much greater is for you to come, and what's ahead of you is far greater than what you've been through. So
thank you.
Yeah, of course. So in terms of like now more so in terms of the themes of the book, you know, I've known you now for, I don't know how long I've known you now. It's been a few years now.
Yeah.
And how has grief changed you as a person?
The first thing that came to my mind is, I don't know, because I feel like I really have only ever known grief. You know, it happened when I was 9. My mum died. For those of you who don't know, my mum died when I was 9, and that's what the book is about. So I do have memories of before the age of 9, and happy memories, excited memories. But when she died, and I still struggle to feel excitement about things, and true joy. I'm discovering it, but it has been such a big part of my life that I don't know. I can't remember much of how I was before this. That's kind of it has fundamentally shaped everything about me, I believe.
Yeah, 100%. It's interesting that you've shared that, and again, and I think through the book as well, you get a sense of that, you know, having read the book and going through this journey with you, because it very much is a journey for everyone. You know, Maya, you take the reader through a journey through some of your deepest and darkest spaces, you know, and the imagery that you use, the metaphors and analogies, and just the language that you use. I felt your pain. So when we're in the first section of the journey, which is the unraveling, which is how the book starts off with after the introduction. Oof, that first poem, which I think actually you're going to read tonight. I mean, the mud and blood. Like, I think it's something. I'm not. You know what I'm talking about, but no, probably other people probably don't have no idea. But they would hear it in the when you recite it, and just the pain. And I remember reading it, and I was like, wow, I remember reading it, and I was like, I would hate to go through this. Genuinely, I was just like, I would hate to have these feelings and to experience grief on this level and this magnitude. And, you know, I have other people in my life, you know, like many other people, grief has come to my family. And I remember losing my aunt years ago, and seeing different people, deal with that. And I think you really helped me to understand my family more by your poetry. And I said it to my father earlier, I think it was last night. I said, I think I understand like my cousins more now because of reading this book and the pain that you went through. And so I think it's this book not only, I think, helps shed light on your grief, but it can help other people recognize their own grief, but also grief in other people in their lives.
I hope so. I really do.
No, 100%. I think with that, I think it'd be great if you recited, I think, the first poem. I think that'd be good. I'm going to mute myself.
20 years, clawing out of your coffin, resurrecting myself from dust to crawl through mud on bloody hands and knees, screaming the night air right out of my lungs, howling at the moon with streaming tears and thirsty sobs, unchaining my domesticated soul, setting her free, baring my teeth, eyes widened in anger. I now stand here, with dirt in my fingernails and your pride in my heart.
Thank you. Thank you for reading that. Talk to us about that poem. It's the first poem in the book for those who don't know. Talk to us about that.
So it's very visceral. It's very, for some people, it's very intense. It is intense. The thing is that many people might not know about my experience is that when my mum died, my dad remarried very quickly, and my mum wasn't spoken about again for about 20 years. And so I'm still livid. I mean, there is rage within me, and I think the poem encapsulates that, because the book isn't just about grief. The book is about what happens when grief isn't addressed. And so that to me is an injustice, a betrayal of her, a betrayal of me. And I know this wasn't intentional, but this is what happened. This is the truth. And so this is how my grief showed up. It was rage. It was extreme desperation. It was pain. I felt like I was clawing out of her coffin for 20 years. And that's why it starts like that. Because my identity had been buried behind a lot of coping mechanisms, a lot of trauma coping mechanisms. I couldn't talk about her. I felt I was betraying people if I spoke about her, or upsetting them, or I would be seen as too much, because the consensus from what I read was that it wasn't okay to talk about her death. So I felt I was wrong, or I was upsetting everyone else. So all this kind of suppressed grief turned into this ball of rage, and it just needed to get out. And I think the imagery in the poem it's like a wolf as well, like clawing and howling at the moon, streaming tears and thirsty sobs. It's like, I can't get enough air, I'm not heard, I'm not seen. It's desperation, basically, and it's rage.
Yeah.
And so I wanted that to be the first poem, because it means so much to me, and it really has been my journey. And unchaining my domesticated soul, I believe that's a journey that many of us are on. I believe many women are on that journey too. We are very domesticated, and I have been rewilding myself for quite a few years, and unpicking myself from the constraints of society and the oppressive nature of capitalism, colonialism, patriarchy. So that also refers to that as well.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's another theme in this book. I think particularly, I think for everyone, like I said, I finished reading this book. I remember I shared with you after I read it, and I went through every stage of this book with you. And by the end, I literally felt power like rushing through my veins. I was just like, and I felt by the end of it that I had been given permission to process my grief, by listening to you. I felt permission, and I literally was in bed, and I voiced it. You heard the voice note I made to myself. But I was like thinking about situations in my life, things that happened, and I was like, nah, like screw that. And I was just in my room just being like, no, like that was injustice, that was inequality, that wasn't fair, like this. And it's all the stuff that I repressed in myself, that was sitting there for years, probably most of my life, that I never allowed to get out because people said, oh, you should just get over it, or society, you know, being a person of color, you can't really show yourself in that way in a lot of different spaces, or whatever it may be. And like reading this book helped give language and permission to me to actually just start getting stuff off my chest and like really processing my grief. And like I said, the book's very transformational. I found it very transformational.
Thank you. That's what I hope for all readers. Because it's even on the back cover, my quote is, I'm not here to sugarcoat grief. I'm here to be transformed by it. And I deliberately wrote that because I didn't want anyone to pick up the book who's not prepared to look at their grief and be transformed by it. Because it's a big thing to do, and it's quite a brave undertaking, because it is quite transformational. It
is. And I think I've seen you grow and transform. And I think you have seen me transform from the first from when we first met each other. And I'm super thankful for that, because there's so much that I was repressing, that being around you and talking to you and like being in a space like in our friendship where actually it's like you give me permission to say no, like say what you really mean, say what you really feel about that situation. And like that's not a space where you're allowed to do that. Like these really deep hurts where you just you hold it because you want to protect other people, or like what do you really feel about that family situation, or what do you really feel about that thing that happened to you at work, or you hold it and you give space. And I think again in this book you are giving space and facilitating a space where people can actually say, no, you know what, that really hurt and that sucked, and actually I'm really upset at this person and I'm not going to feel bad about it.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point, because I have experienced what it's like not to feel like I had space, and to feel like I was pushing myself down and being completely inauthentic. And I remember I've still got so many diaries where I was just so angry. So in my real life, I was presenting as like a nice girl, getting the good grades and everything. And then in these diaries, honestly, capital letters like, fuck this, like really, really angry. And the thing is, I think, and I think this goes for everyone, but I will speak from the point of view of a woman and a woman of color. Rage is not allowed. Rage is not acceptable, and you have to put a smile on your face. And if you're angry at someone, you have to just swallow it down. And I'm just sick of it. I feel rage. I feel rage at a lot of things, and I think that's okay. I don't believe that's dangerous. I think it's more dangerous to suppress it.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to address the dark aspects of, I guess I speak about the dark feminine in the book, which is the opposite of love and light. It's like love and fury, love and darkness. We are so afraid of our own darkness and our own shadow, and we split into two, where we're just really nice, and then underneath it, it's like almost like, I've used this analogy before, and some of you may find it very intense, but like underneath the surface or underneath the soil, there's like maggots, because we're eating, it's kind of, they're eating us alive. And I think if we can just accept that we all feel rage, we all feel shame, we all feel fury and despair, disgust, then we can start to integrate and become more whole. And it's a very normal part of the human process. And to be honest, with the injustices happening in the world, rage is necessary right now.
100%. I think, I see different women in my life, repressing their rage. And I remember saying to one of them, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, I said, look, you need to literally go into a room, shut the door, and just cuss everyone out. Like, just go and to yourself, just cuss everyone out, use every cuss word you can possibly come up with, enunciate it perfectly, and just cuss everyone out. Because it's like, and it's not to be vulgar or provocative. It's just the fact that like we repress so much, and so much of it, and I see again in the women, with different women in my life, so much of it is this nice veneer, and like being like poised and together and like, okay, yes, of course, and doing what people are asking them to do. And I think as women, I see that. Like, I've seen that in the women in my life, and I've seen that, you know, and it's sad because it's like, I know they're not fully engaging with everything that they feel. I know they're not. And it's one of the injustices, you know, of patriarchy. And one of the, I think the saddening parts of patriarchy is that, you know, for a lot of women, not all women, but for a lot of women, I know that they feel this repression and oppression, and this real kind of call to have to be kind of poised and together. And, you know, I know recently I've just have released the women in my life, ones that I'm around. I said, you don't have to perform like that for me, because you need to be upset. You should be upset. The fact that more people aren't upset in this world, I think, is part of the problem why things are continuing to exist. Social issues are existing the way they do, because more people aren't tapping into the rage and like the fury that comes with this world.
Yeah. Fury is a sign of love for yourself, that your boundaries have been broken or overstepped, and love for other people, that their boundaries have been overstepped. I feel furious at what's happening around me because I feel love and I don't want people to be hurt. So rage should be made back into an acceptable emotion and a sign that boundaries are being overstepped.
Yeah. There's so much I want to speak about, and I know we don't have the time to speak all about it, because I mean, you and I's conversations last for hours. It's, for those who don't know, I mean, Maya and I will be here literally till like the early morning talking. But again, this thing of rage, and I will honestly say, you have been someone who've helped set me free. And like this whole niceness and politeness, I this year was the year I realized how much of my niceness and politeness is a trauma response. I'm nice and polite. Not that I'm a good guy, don't get me wrong, but a lot of this kind of like performative niceness and politeness is because I don't feel safe in the spaces that I'm in a lot of the times. And it's because I'm actually repressing a lot of the rage that I do feel. I'm angry a lot of the time. So for anyone who's out there who does know me, I'm angry a lot. Like a lot of the times I'm just angry. But then when you see me, I'm like, hey, what's up? What's going on? Because I know that that's not a space where I can actually even let that rage out. And so again, it's tapping into rage, not to stay there and to live there forever. But the thing is, you can't actually heal it if you don't express it. And I personally believe we have a world that is not healing because they are not allowed or have not given themselves permission to actually process their rage, their grief, their trauma.
Exactly. And actually, there is one of the poems that we both love in the book. I think that speaks brilliantly to it. And I wondered if I could
100%.
Say that poem, actually, because it speaks about just that. Okay. And I just want to show everyone, I don't know if you can see, but with the poem, there's a picture of Kali. Many of you might know Kali Ma and what she represents, but she means a lot to me. And this poem was inspired by her as well. Okay. You loved me from the shadows, nourished me with death, taught me to raise my voice from a whisper to a growl, taught me to say my own name clearly, to straighten my spine into a warrior's, showed me love didn't have to be gentle to be right, caressed me fiercely, knowingly, smothered me with the truth, blessed my rage. You shot the stars out of the sky, taught me how to find light in the darkness.
Beautiful. I mean, you know my favorite line in there already. I love the part where it says, blessed my rage. That one line right there. When I read that, it just hit me on an energetic level. I would just say, blessed, to have someone bless your rage, to see you traumatized, to see you in rage and fury, and not say calm down, not say be quiet, not say, act like you need to fit in or anything like that, but actually someone just saying, I bless that. I see what you're doing and I bless it.
Yeah. And rage is what brought this book into being.
Yeah. So
rage can be a really, really creative force. I'm not saying everyone should be rageful all the time. I think rage, when overdone, can cause illness as well. But rage can be fueled into very, very creative things. It's a motivator for some of us. So I never want to push rage away or demonize it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's one of those things as well. I think when people talk about rage, they just see like people smashing windows and people like just absolute carnage and chaos.
Yeah.
And that's not what either you or I are talking about. It's actually allowing yourself to experience that emotion again, and then like you said, it created this, and I believe it's going to help so many other people. And I know for myself, my rage is what created the company that I used to work for. It's what's creating the platform I'm putting together now creatively. And there's a lot of power in it. It's learning how to control it and channel it.
Yeah, and it's a big part of grief. One of the stages of grief is anger. Anger towards the person who's died as well. That can often happen. Anger towards people around you. So, there's rage is really, really a massive part of grief. So I wanted to kind of just add that in, really.
Yeah, no, it is. It really is. And I know for some people listening, it may be like, oh my gosh, this may be like a very like scary and like kind of intense conversation, because again, this is not a message that in mainstream society that we're encouraged to receive. And it really is about giving yourself permission to be upset. It is, there's a lot to be upset about. And again, it doesn't mean that you spend your whole life being upset and you don't enjoy things. I love my life. I literally love my life. And my life is so rich and full. But there are things that I know that I've suppressed, and it's about me being able to actually heal from that. But the only way I can heal from that is actually to tap in. I've got to go there. I've got to go there and process it. Yeah. Do you want to read another poem?
Yes.
Go for it.
Okay, so I'll read. Okay, so I think that I'll read this one. This is quite a short one, but it's one of my favorites, and it's regarding my family. So my brother, my father, and I, and my mother. Okay. In the cemetery, 3 people met, bound by death's softly spoken hymn. Death's husband, death's daughter, death's son, waiting silently beneath the willow trees.
Talk to us about that.
So this is about us not talking, and this is about us not talking about our grief and how we were silent for so many years. And I remember we went to a graveyard a few years ago, like me, my brother and my father, and there were willow trees in the graveyard. And finally we spoke about my mum after about 20 years. And this poem kind of was inspired by that. Yeah. And the thing is, we're all bound by death's softly spoken hymn. It's like, even if we don't say it, it's there and we're waiting silently. And it's almost as if we're suspended because we haven't spoken about her. We haven't put her to rest. Yeah. Basically, between the 3 of us, we haven't. And so she's there. It's just this in my introduction, I call it like an unspoken love song, and almost like a grief unerupted, because she's just there. And so that just came out. There isn't much logic to it in a way. It was just an intuitive download. It's how I felt, just waiting.
Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned it in the book, but I know you mentioned it to me as well, that you and your father and your brother didn't speak about your mom's death for 20 years after she passed.
Yeah, like it makes me laugh because it's ridiculous. Like it really is, and I don't know how we've all coped. Like I really don't, because such a big loss. I honestly don't know how we've done it. I mean, like my brother and I thankfully had some family members that we could speak to. Yeah. But we haven't spoken about it enough or really processed our grief with anyone. So yeah, it was about 20 years. And even now, we haven't properly really explored it together.
Yeah. I think this is, and thank you for sharing that, and I know other families will relate to that. Having things happen and brushing it under the rug, whether it's a death or perhaps it's abuse or it's something that, something that happens, something that's traumatic that happens. I know I was sharing something with you earlier this week that was from like when I was like 11 or 12 that has been completely unprocessed.
Yeah.
And it manifests itself in different ways. We think sometimes we're doing a good thing by getting on with things and like actually composing ourselves and keeping it together. But in all reality, what we're doing is just delaying something that is inevitable, because it will manifest itself in some way.
It will. And what was I going to say about that? Yeah, it will inevitably manifest itself. And if it's not manifested, it turns into illness, or rage, or shame, or guilt. And so all these different types of things. And for me, I actually developed through a variety of different things, but like CPTSD, so complex post-traumatic stress disorder, because I hadn't processed this grief, and so it just turned up in like a lot of different ways. Perfectionism being one of the issues that I had, like just extreme perfectionism, anxiety, all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I know we've got a few minutes, and I'm going to give us a few more minutes until we get into the Q&A. I would like for you to read another a poem.
Sure.
Yeah, read another.
Would you have a preference as to what I would read?
Ooh, I think I do. I think I do. Well, do you have one that's on like kind of burning for you?
No, I'm happy to go with what you
Okay. Okay. I think I'm going to choose. I think I'm going to choose page 20.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You are ground into the marrow of my bones. How ironic that it was the very thing that ended you.
I know I shared with you before, for me, some of the most profound pieces in this book are the shortest. And for me, for those who don't know, your mother, correct me if I'm wrong, your mother passed away of leukemia.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so when it talks about the marrow of, you are ground into the marrow of my bones, how ironic that it is the very thing that ended you, because that was the situation with your mother, unfortunately. And I just felt that was so, after reading the introduction to the book where you get the story of what happened to your mother, and then reading that, I mean, it's like a dagger right to the heart. You're like, wow, like it's powerful. It's powerful, and it's gut wrenching. It's like, yeah.
I experience grief as very, very embodied. So the book has a lot of references to the body as well as elements. So water, earth, air, fire. It's very indigenous, basically. And it's a testament to India too. So there are tigers and cobras and native plants from India and Kali. But yeah, the body is, because grief is so embodied. It really is. And so a lot of my poems are about the lungs and the ribs and just where this grief has been so stuffed in. And so, yeah, she is ground into the marrow of my bones. There's no doubt about that. But it was also the thing that caused her to die. So it's kind of bittersweet, really.
Yeah. I want to touch on something you touched about just quickly before we go to Q&A, about the grief you felt with your mother. And I know you shared this with me off screen, but the grief you felt with your mother and how that relates to the grief of India.
Yeah.
And what that means for this book. Could you share that with us?
Of course. So this is something that I actually didn't even think about until this year, when George Floyd was murdered. A lot of my racial trauma resurfaced, and I became very activated. And a few of you know that I do a lot of work now around anti-racism and racial trauma and re-indigenization and decolonization. I learned more about what happened to India under British colonization, under British rule. And so I realized that I had this massive disconnect from my motherland and my culture, and also having been brought up in a step family and a stepmom who is white, very sort of traditionally English, or at least was at that time. And so a lot of when I moved in with her a lot of the ways of being that were very Indian ended. And so I was surrounded by white people on the streets because I lived in a very white town, and in school as well. And so I was just completely disconnected from my culture, apart from some small trips to see family, Indian family members. And I just remember feeling like completely disconnected. And I think I grieve the years that I have not been connected to India. And it's almost like it feels a bit numb sometimes. Like it's like I don't even know how to go about it, but I just know that it's there. It's like my motherland, and there's so much that it's like I feel like my ancestors' grief as well. There's a lot to process still, but I feel like my mother is a metaphor also for the motherland, and that she was an Indian woman that I saw every day and then suddenly didn't. So she was like a reflection of me in womanhood, and then suddenly I didn't see that anymore. So I grieve like seeing an Indian woman in front of me every day to reflect my Indian beauty. And that was a massive part of a lot of the trauma that I felt as well. So there's a lot of different strands in that. But grieving India is a complex process, but it's definitely there.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you for sharing that. And I would, it's not for this conversation because that'll be a whole nother thing. But yeah, I just want to honor you and honor your family and those of Indian descent who live within the UK. The trauma that has been experienced from that country and the descendants from that country. And as another person of color, just sharing that you all have not been forgotten, and that that what we go through together, and the justice that is to be served will be served for India as well.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you.
I think we need to go to Q&A now.
Sure.
I gave us a few extra minutes. I gave us as long as I could, because I knew it wasn't going to be right on, but I gave us as long as we could. Let's go to Q&A. We've got Mel and Becky at the top.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask a few questions on a few people's behalves.
Perfect.
Just to say thank you to Dan and to Maya for a really, really interesting and poignant conversation. I feel like today is a good day to be talking about this. I think we're all feeling grief. I personally am anyway, for what we've had come before and what we're just about to go back into. So this is feeling very cathartic for a Sunday evening. Thank you from me personally. But some wonderful comments and people feeling really inspired by your words. So some comments we've had so far include rewilding myself. I love that. So I think we all need a bit of rewilding. Trey was saying that he loves creative anger. So this is something we could all practice a bit more of. I have a question first that's come in from Pearl. So Pearl is asking, so I'm guessing this is to you, Maya. Do you think we ever stop processing grief?
That is a very good question. And personally, from my own experience, I haven't stopped processing it. And I think even if you stop processing a personal grief, you will always be processing environmental, collective, colonial grief all the time. So I believe we don't ever stop processing grief. No, I think it's an intrinsic part of our human experience.
Thank you. I agree. And leading on from that, let's go to Becky next. I believe Becky's sound is working if she wants to say something. Hi, Becky.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. Hi. That was just great. Thank you so much. But my question is really around your use of the word intuition. So intuition is one of my favourite subjects. I've written a book on that myself. It's my crazy happy place. But the way in which you're describing it, like an intuitive download, it's almost like you're saying that it's something that comes from somewhere beyond you. And yet the poems are so personal to you. So it's, and it makes me think of Elizabeth Gilbert, the way she talks about genius and the word jinn, and how the word jinn is something that kind of comes, is a spirit that kind of comes through us. And we're talking about grief, so we're talking about dead people. So I wondered if you could talk more about the personal intuition, but also a sense of it coming from a more meaningful place, if I've interpreted what you were saying correctly.
Yeah, and firstly I want to say, I think I've got your book. Is it called You Do Know?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I've got your book. I was like, oh my God,
That's really freaking me out now. That's amazing. Thank you.
I've got it.
I love it.
Actually, there is, I'm going to answer you in a poem, because there is actually a poem exactly about this particular thing. If that's okay with you.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you.
Just bear with me while I find it. Or at least I feel it's about that. The tenuous line between the land of the breathing and the realm of ghosts, thin as thread, silken, slips through a needle easily. I live in a place where each world seeps through the seams, where death exists even in the living.
Oh yeah, that hit a point. That's big. I totally get that. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
So good. Any other questions?
Yeah, we have one more question from Nina. I'm not sure whether I can enable her voice, so I will ask it if she doesn't mind. She says, hi Maya, how have family members reacted to your book, and how have you dealt with their reactions?
That's an interesting question. So I think overall family members have been very supportive. I don't believe many family members have read the book. Not that I personally mention anyone in a derogatory way at all, but I'm not going to lie. I've been afraid to talk about these things, because I've been silent for so long about my grief, and I felt that it's a betrayal of people to talk about how I feel, even though I know that's not true. So it's been difficult, even though I've had people being supportive. Yeah, it's a hard one. I think I'll have to wait and see until they've read it and see what they think. But personally, this has been a journey for me in validating myself and loving my truth and speaking my truth, because if I can't do it, who else is going to do it, basically? So it's been more of a journey for myself through this.
I think that's it for the questions we had. There's been some lovely comments coming in as well. So Maya, you may want to have a read through those and absorb those. And I can save the comments as well, so we can reflect on them. I had one question for you both, actually, about you're both people who've worked with trauma and grief and people going through all kinds of things. And as a community, as a global community, we've all been through an extraordinary time in the last year, and we are still in it, and we're still about to go through more. And before the pandemic hit, I was suffering what I thought was eco grief. So I was very upset about all the things that were going on kind of to the natural world, and then the pandemic happened, and now it's like the human cost, that we're experiencing. And so without wanting to drag us down into the doldrums, I was really interested in both of your perspectives on how we process and assimilate where we are now, and are there lessons from your work that we can draw from which can help us stay grounded and stay optimistic and stay calm, even though we are experiencing extraordinary times that we've never ever been trained or kind of equipped to maybe deal with.
Shall I go first?
Go for it, Maya, go for it.
So I think that with the combination of the seasons and the fact that we are now going back into lockdown, I do think this is a perfect time to go inwards a little bit and to explore those sort of deeper, darker feelings. But what I would say is, yes, cry it out, kind of meditate, go inwards a bit more, but also find people who are really on your wavelength to support you through it. Because everyone will hopefully have at least one or two people that can really, really support them. But I do encourage people just to start exploring their sort of darker emotions. I can't encourage that enough. I've done it, and I'm still here. And actually, I feel a lot happier for it because I'm not suppressing it anymore. So that would be my advice.
Mine would be very similar. The first thing that came to my mind was seasons, and in the same way, I think it was Pearl that asked the question, do we ever stop processing grief? And Maya, you responded no, and we don't. It's a part of the human experience. And the same way that life goes through seasons and this earth literally goes through seasons, the same way we as humans go through seasons. And, I think right now, collectively, we're in a season of grief. We're in that's where we're at right now, whether it's, I think we have been for a while now, whether it's the Me Too movement, whether it's Black Lives Matter, whether it's, the ridiculous amount of injustices and inequality on a systemic level, the pandemic. Now we're about to go back into the pandemic. And I would just echo what Maya said, really allow yourself to feel the grief, feel the pain, feel the loss. It's okay to feel these things, and again, it's not for you to stay there the rest of your life. Again, it's a cycle, but if you don't go through that cycle, you get stuck on the first cycle. And a lot of us are stuck on this nice and polite cycle, and we can't seem to get out of it. We're just like nice and polite. And then British culture doesn't help with that. So we're just there stuck, like fixated on that. And we've got to go from cycle 1 to cycle 2, which is grief. And the book touches on that quite a lot, this journey. And don't get me wrong, you go to grief and there's a lot of stuff that comes up. Like there's some, you'll be talking, you'll have COVID grief, and then you'll be like, oh, this grief from when I was 10 is coming up as well. And just let it come up, because it's stuff that's been repressed. Mm-hmm. But there is another stage after grief, and it's more progressive, and it'll move you along. But we want to bypass this cycle, and in order to heal properly and to move on, we've got to engage with the grief, like Maya has portrayed so well in this book.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think you may have just coined the phrase COVID grief. I think it's something I'm going to express in the next few weeks.
Express away.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Perfect. Maya, I think that is just about all the time we have for this evening. Maya, I could talk to you forever, and I just want to thank you again for this book, because like I said, it has helped me, and I'm processing my grief. I'm and that I've been stuck on nice and polite for a long time. And this book and being friends with you has helped me move into the grief cycle. And that's the cycle I'm in right now, the beginning stages of that. And so I want to personally thank you for this book. I want to thank you for the work that you do on a daily basis. So I want to thank you personally for the work you do and how you've impacted my life, and how you've, in such a positive way, and helped me step more into my power, and helped me step more into the person that I am, this unbecoming that I have gone through this year, and that you facilitated and helped facilitate. And I also want to thank you on behalf of the collective, for everyone on this call and the collective around the world, because when we heal ourselves, we help the collective, and you are helping so many other people, I believe, to help heal themselves. And so I want to thank you again, personally and collectively. I want to thank you and honor you for the work that you do. I know it's not easy work. It's a lot of deep, dark, emotional work. There's a lot of tears. There's a lot of strained relationships sometimes for you. There's a lot. And I just want to thank you and celebrate you and honor you in this moment.
Thank you. And thank you for seeing me. That means a lot. It really does. Thank you so much.
Of course. And I love you very, very much. And I'm so, so proud of you. Where can people get the book?
So people can get the book via lulu.com. So if they go onto lulu.com and they just type in Half Woman, Half Grief, there's also, I will send a link out to everyone who's registered for this Eventbrite launch. So I will send a link out with the book and the paperback and the ebook links, so you can buy them straight from there as well.
Amazing. Perfect. Are there any final words that you have, Maya?
I just want to say thank you to everyone who is on this call. It actually takes quite a lot of bravery to engage in a conversation like this. I feel like we're holding an energetic space together, and this will be very healing, hopefully, for all of us. And it's been very healing for me. I want to just make that very clear. It's been an honor. Thank you.
No worries. Everyone, Half Woman, Half Grief by Michael. I read it. It literally took me. It probably took me an hour to read. I'm not even sure it took me a full hour. You will get through it, and it's something I'm looking forward to rereading again. Half Woman, Half Grief. Lulu.com. Get your copy. It is transformative. I assure you that. On behalf of myself, we want to thank you for coming out this evening. And for being here, for holding space for us to have this conversation. take care of yourself as we go into this next phase of lockdown. I also want to give another honor to Nitin Patel. Am I saying that correct?
So I barely say it correctly, but it's Nutan Patel, but I say it with an English accent. So
Nutan Patel. So we want to honor her memory and honor her existence and her spirit tonight. And I just thank you again, Maya. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening. All the best. We'll see you soon.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Take care.